Okay, so a little bit of an introduction to how I got to this place where I'm crazily creating gardens for people, and then, as I say, the learnings and the next steps of where we are. So I grew up in the Shire, just like Hobbiton and Cheshire in England, and I had a pretty idyllic childhood. I'm very, very fortunate. I learned to swim in the river. That was my nature memory, catching stickleback. And my grandpa had the most beautiful garden and grew tomatoes and grapes in the north of England, and he put them out for people. And so that was magic to me. And so then that led. It'll come back. Yeah. It'll come back. So I'll just talk anyway. Alex, so that led to me going to do a landscape architecture degree, and that's all sort of part of getting me towards my career until most recently, which has been working in the construction industry. And I was seconded to the government for a while into a whole movement for change around how we can build better, faster, safer, cheaper buildings, but very much around that one dimension really of productivity. But that was me in the 80s. I was a child of Thatcher. I did what I was told. I went out, bid successful, wore the shoulder pads, had the BMW convertible, and did all those things, which are very different to who I am now. And, oh, well done, Alex. My favourite, I can't actually read. So after a while, I met my husband quite late, and we decided he wanted to be an engineer abroad, and he mentioned Saudi, and I said, absolutely not. We had family here in New Zealand, so New Zealand bound. But this is what I was craving. So all of that rat race of a life in London was not really me. I wanted... did anyone else see this growing up? That was in my heart. But when we got here, I realised that both Tim and I are village people. We like to be able to have bumpability where we can just walk down and get a pint of milk and have a chat with the butcher and the baker. And so the good life here, the lifestyle wasn't for us. So we bought the smallest house we could with the biggest bit of land. And it was a steep city, 1/4 acre, covered in agapanthus, hawthorn, which I now have a different relationship with, having learnt more about my Celtic roots, but at the time it came out. And it was quite a lot of work for me. So I started coming to this place, to the Sustainable Backyard Trail, and met a fantastic guy called Matthew here and learned about something called the Ruth Stout Gardening Without Work method. And super simple, she wrote a whole book in the 1950s, a wonderful lady that gardened into her 90s. And I can summarise the whole book with one line: 6 inches of hay on everything. It weeds, it feeds, it waters, and if you imagine hay makes a horse, it keeps a garden. And so that allowed me to suddenly be able to garden this 1/4 acre with this deep mulch, no dig practice. And so we then got somebody had to move to Wellington, where I met Emily and Gary Williams, and I was so hoping that you're here today. I think Gary is not well at the moment.
He's doing all right. He's in hospital, but he's doing okay. I talked to him yesterday.
Emily was really amazing for me. I did her organic gardening certificate at Victoria Polytechnic on the Kapiti Coast, and then I went off to do her PDC with Gary and Emily, and I just started it, and it was my founding memory of that, having come from that shoulder pads, rat race sort of world, and then walking into this place where we had a stone and spirit. And it awakened me, and I remember we had a young guy came along and talked about his diploma. He was doing how do you tell the health of a river, and he compared the difference of the westernised Pakeha method with test tubes and chemicals, and to the Maori method, which was to observe the eels. And this, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. It just awakened. Took me back to that river that I need to swim in, and I started something off. So, watering and feeding. So I sort of thought, well, landscape architecture is my passion, yeah, gardening is my passion. So I reinvigorated myself, or so I thought, with a diploma in landscape architecture, and it just felt so two-dimensional, so flat. You know, landscape architecture is all about aesthetics, what it looks like. And so I was drawn into something called the Regenerative Practitioner, the TLP. Has anyone here done it? Finn's not here today, but Finn and I did it together. You guys have done it. It's a course which, I did it over lockdown in June. It's a course which is run from America. It takes the top of your head off. It rummages around in there, reorganises everything, and then puts the top of your head back on and says, out you go. And you take all the machine language out of your vocabulary, and you remember yourself as a part of the living system. And that forever changes you. So similar to the work that we did this morning. Thank you, Leah. And then I got into my very first job, which I met a lady on a meditation retreat, which was to design Manurewa Community Mara. And so I used all my landscape architecture skills and brought in the regenerative practice, but there was still something missing. And Rory, I've forgotten his surname, Rory Fogarty I met, and he did his diploma at the same time. I think he's moved back to Ireland, otherwise he would have had a certificate today as well. He and I talked about permaculture, and so I found Trish's and Gunter's permaculture PVC and went and did that. And the timing was beautiful, and so it really kind of started to round everything, which is where the focus of Gift the Garden is going. But I'll just tell you one more thing. At this time as well, my husband quite fancied having bees. And I found a lady who had bees, and I got bees, and they put me into work. They started talking to me. Not with little bee voices, but I started to work with them and get intuitions, and also just be very aware of everything around me that was impacting on them. And it was a big surprise to me. I love animals, but it was a big surprise that I could have a relationship with insects, and I still do. They're very precious to me. And I do think that this is their work that I'm doing. And that led me also to if you remember Dan Palmer, the most beautiful, wonderful guy, and I did his living design course. And with still some of my Western thinking, Dan and I sort of went head to head a little bit about the idea of an oak tree, an acorn. Does it have a plan? As a project manager, yes, of course, I said, it's all in the genetics. He said, no, it doesn't, it's all about... And I'd love to say to Dan, I get it now, I get it now. I understand. The acorn responds to its environment, its unique place, where it is right now. Yes, it might have potential, but it doesn't necessarily have a plan as we understand it. So Dan's course was very influential for me. And I started to hold workshops teaching people this amazing method of growing with hay, which meant that you could do a lot with very little work. And then I became president of the St. Heliers Garden Club, which was kind of a bit strange. So I got all this going on in me, and I had these beautiful, wonderful, mostly 70, 80, 90-year-old ladies, and I'm not kidding, a few of them, gardeners live a long time. Who, with all this gorgeous knowledge, but a lot of them were very traditional about spray this, spray that. And I remember cringing when somebody told me she'd gone out with Mortine at night and sprayed her feijoas and heard the codling moth drop on the floor. So I had this job through COVID, and it was supposed to be 1 year, it ended up being 3, of taking the oldest club in St. Heliers through that, knowing that some of the practices were not what I wanted to do. It was very informative of how to communicate and work with people, to take them on a journey from a very particular place. So I don't regret that at all. And then Gift the Garden began, and Gunter can't be here today, but he mentored me through that early days. Every morning, on a Thursday, every week, we'd have a 1 hour 6 a.m. Zoom, and I shared what I knew about regenerative practice, and in turn he mentored me through my first projects, which I was quite nervous about. And so then I started on my diploma in permaculture. So the diploma is all about how to activate a mandala of living gardens, and is Rob Guyton here? He talked about that yesterday, and a couple of other people have talked about, Rabina talked about this. Gardens which serve to regenerate nature, people, Kai, as you saw in the video. The key thing for me is my unique little essence that I'm bringing to this is that bringing together that knowledge of landscape architecture, permaculture, and regenerative practice, to use this blend and use all three of them. And it's my dearest wish to move into the mainstream landscape architecture industry and help them journey along towards the message that is all life. This is my garden. It's not a current picture, but it's you can see how steep it is, and over the years, sometimes by hand, my husband and I terraced it so that we could work with it. And so the diploma had three main outcomes. Trish, I didn't get my proposal approved first time around. I was full of regenerative speak, and it came back to me with, speak English. And so I had to rewrite it, but Trish, who mentored me, was really good in focusing me on outcomes and measures. So the three outcomes were that mandala of beautiful gardens, and we put a number against that, a story to engage people, to get those people who have no awareness of what's under their feet in terms of the life, how to engage them. And then to start to build a guild of stakeholders that will create something that is beyond me, and I'm going to be excited to share what naturally is happening around that. And so these are the gardens. I don't think you can see it very well, but we have here what I call the head of the dog, which is my place, my watershed, which is the Eastern Bays of Auckland. So most of the gardens are in that place, because if anything the regenerative practice gave me is to understand that we want to work in our unique place. And when David Holgram spoke yesterday, I rejoiced, because he said, basically, I paraphrase, but look down at your feet and work with what's at your feet right now. And if everybody does that, then we will start to create something beautiful, not worry about what's out there. Some of the gardens that I worked on were outside of that. So I worked on commercial spaces, with Kangaroo, with schools, and also community gardens, but a lot of private gardens as well. So those are some of the numbers. I'll just let you look at them. We created a website. My neighbour gifted me this beautiful logo. She's very talented. So I had a lot of gifts along the way to make this happen. And we, through my work in the construction industry, we had some amazing stakeholders come together and make some of these gardens happen. If anyone's wondering, on the left, that's my flow form made by Ian Truesville down in Napier. He's amazing. My flow form is too. So that leads me to what did I learn? And there are there are probably more, but there are 5 key aha moments that came to me on the beach that day. The first one was, you may share this, what is permaculture, says somebody in a lift. And you've got 3 floors to tell them. How do you share that? Because it's just so rich and so full, and it's almost a way of being, isn't it? It's not a thing. So I worked on the lift conversation, and I'll share that for me. I'll share that shortly. And then something about beauty is in the eye, behold it. In fact, I won't go through the list here. Let's go through them one by one. So I looked at the 12 permaculture principles, which I absolutely love, and the ethics, and I sort of juiced them down for my St Heliers Garden Club audience into 5 things that they could get. And I did look at cross-pollinating them with the 12 principles, but to be quite honest, all of the principles are in all of these 5 what I call essentials in your garden to be gifted. So growing food, providing for birds and bees, protection for extreme weather, which is deep soil, which is trees, which is just planting everywhere. We heard that yesterday. Recycling stuff. One of the things I noticed in the construction industry, unlike the soil and ecology, we don't have any detritivores, we don't have any industries, businesses ready to start breaking things down and making it ready for the next element. So, and then creating community, which is key. And throughout all the gift gardens, one of the things I've learned is there's no point in creating a garden with people unless there's a caretaker, there's a community to look after and love that garden. So that was just a little attempt at cross-fertilising across the principles. But let's move on to the next one. So the next one was quite an eye-opener for me. If anyone's into philosophy, it was quite a head-scratch because I realised what is the difference between landscape architecture and permaculture. I learned more in my permaculture PDC in, 40 hours of learning than 3 years of a degree about design. And I couldn't figure this out. Why is that so important? And permaculture teaches us about the systems, about ecology, about how things work without us making the machine at all. But landscape architecture pretty much for 3 years is focused on what does it look like. And so it's that dimension, but what it looks like is important. And I wondered, why is that? And one of the first gardens the very first garden that we had a little practice on was a friend of mine who just had a great big lawn and she wanted to bring more life, so we rewilded it. And you can see the main path through here, but it was in the Sustainable Garden Trail that I'll talk about. And it was not universally loved by my St Heliers Garden Club people, or a number of people that came out and said, that's not a garden. And yet I'd just come back from Chelsea Flower Show and seen plantain and dandelions in beds where they kind of getting it there. So I thought, what is it about beauty and why do we love our mown lawns? Why do we love our mown burns? And I realised that there's a connection between feeling like something is controlled by us and will provide for us with beauty. And so, and there's also a recognition that my eye is changing. What I consider beautiful and other people's eyes will change as well. What you consider beautiful today may not be beautiful tomorrow. So the whole awareness and education is so critical. I look at that and I see all the life in it and I think it's beautiful. And then the third learning was integrate, don't segregate. We know this. So bringing permaculture brings that ecological system thinking of creating a garden that's going to pump with life whatever we do. Landscape architecture brings that order enabled, because I'm working in Auckland CBD, you know, I'm working in a city centre where people have plastic grass and swimming pools. So we're starting from that base. So we need to bring in elements of landscape architecture, and this is a beautiful garden that we delivered for a lady called Penny, whose husband had passed, and this is a meditation pyramid, and nothing in our gardens is concreted in or cemented in, it's all done by hand. Alex and Ellen worked on this garden, and Ellen still does. And Joy's helping Penny, but it looks beautiful, and so there's an aesthetic as well, and I think Bina talking about this yesterday. And then regenerative practice brings the really important aspect of how can this place serve the greater whole, and how many of us think about that when we're doing our permaculture designs. We're doing our sector analysis with some boundaries, but how many of us look at our watershed, our life shed, and start thinking about how can we serve the bats that are coming in across that, the birds that are coming in across there, the water that's passing through our place. How are we going to serve the greater whole? And this is an example of working with Kangaroa on it hasn't been built yet, but it's a social housing scheme with multiple stories. And this was the original design that I was called in to give some permaculture advice, which I was thrilled about. But the Boffa-Miskel, you know, significant landscape architecture company, and they actually wanted to listen. And they put number 5, the bin stores, the vegetable beds, which was a new thing for Kangaroa, next to the bin stores. You know, they segregated those things out, and then they segregated the children's play from the people, and then the beautiful tree, which was the heart of this piece of land. An ancient Utakala was segregated again. So we had a bit of a jam session around permaculture, and these were some sketches that came out of things that we could do about integrating people and children and food and everything right into the centre, and the views that would be seen from the people. And they came back with this new design, which I think was a huge improvement, with the vegetable mandalas and the kids play all working together. Children's walks and through where the tree was with lots of planting. So that was a really great experience. And that leads me on to the fourth principle, which is this bringing into design the story of place. So focusing, and we've heard this today yesterday from a few people, looking at what is the watershed, what is this place, how is this place seated, what's coming in and out, wider than just our place, how can it, what's the history of the place, people, geology, etc. And so Lucy's garden had a fence blown down with the storms that we had, and a whole load of poplars from the council land here fell into her garden, so she had a new start. And she wanted to just put up a fence and ignore this creek, which is a tributary of the Oamaru Creek, which is a very beautiful creek that leads into Tahina Terrae Reserve in Auckland. And so we started to talk about, well, what about if you had a relationship? I know you, where you're living, you're a bit nervous of people coming up into your garden. But what if we created something that opened that experience? And originally we were going to have a low fence that she could lean over with a glass of wine, a little fire pit down here. But they went for this see-through fence, and there's a gate. And they're down doing planting. Lucy has got a load of people doing planting at the creek, so they're restoring that creek, which has eels in it as well. And you can see we use a lot of recycled material. The fence was her old fence, and that's Lucy having a celebration. And just a couple more. This is a community garden that hasn't been built yet in Auckland, around Geo Glen and his pool. And so the final learning point was about bring on the defightables. Let's recycle, reuse. The Onehunga Recycling Centre is somewhere you can go to in Auckland to get almost anything. Through my relationship with the construction industry, Auckland Transport said, here's some houses we're going to knock down, knock yourself out. So we were able to walk through the houses and pick up things, and the wall in St Heliers was made with fences that I got from there. Ellen made this beautiful bench out of pallets for a penny. So let's get the recycling movement going. It is going. Let's just share it. Let's talk about it. This is Gunter, the back off. But many of you know Gunter, working with me on the school project. The children having put their little favourite treasures in the town park. And then crushed concrete. We're learning from the UK that this is a fabulous medium for growing, and I won't go into it now, but look it up. So this is pennies with urbanite. Gunter told us how to use broken concrete, smashing concrete, and make beautiful structures with it. And another garden that I was really concerned here with water runoff. So this one, the water flashed off, so we made this fantastic structure. It now looks amazing with the 42 types of fruit trees in 400 square metres of property. And a mandala. Gunter built this one as well. Okay. So next steps, where are we going now? So we found ourselves with some funding from the local board. We have a fantastic local board and community. And so we started a sustainable garden trail with all of those gardens plus some more from the garden club and others. And that's then spread, so people came to that and said, I'm going to set up my own trail. So Moy and Albert Eden have set up her trail, and then Lena on the Hibiscus Coast, and we have Leslie here today. She's not here. Oh, Lindsay, sorry, not Leslie, from the Hibiscus Coast. And then there's one, Marlies, are you here? Yep, wants to set one up in the Waitakaris in the west and all the west. So we've, from the funding that we had, we created this logo and website, and so anyone who wants to set up a trail, you can use the website, we'll gift you the logo and everything. We've got lots of practices and processes you can take, or you can do your own thing, it doesn't matter. Let's just get this fantastic Kelpa club that happens in Taranaki up into Tamaki Makara. And so that's the website, some good press. We had 300 people through my garden alone, and we've run it for 2 years now. And then now the gardens things have been noticed. So this is a posh garden designers festival in Auckland in 2 weeks. And they said, oh, we want a permaculture garden. Would you consider opening your garden? By the way, there's going to be 1,500 people at the weekend. Thanks, I already said yes, and now you tell me that. So the garden is in that, and there's been a little bit of press in the Herald, the first permaculture garden in garden, and the Kiwi Gardener, if anyone gets that, page 15, there's a nice spread. But the amazing thing is that these messages now are getting out into the mainstream. So if one person rips up their plastic grass and turns that into a food forest or just vegetable beds or a wildlife meadow, fantastic. We have a group of us now. It's not just me anymore designing in this way. So stand up, Ellen and Alex. So Ellen and Alex and I and others, we every Tuesday we meet for 1 hour and we share the gardens that we're designing. We have a website, people inquire, and we just mentor each other and just enjoy each other, don't we? And that group is growing, and anyone is welcome to join that group as well. So we've got a whole series of common processes and practices which we can share, which you can use or you don't have to use. And then our latest idea, which is an idea still, but we're working on it, is to get a permaculture plant library, a physical library in Taranaki that we can go to, and it'll be all labelled up, and you can take seeds or cuttings and just, so that's our latest idea. So all in all, that is my diploma.